Welcome in to another episode of The Extra Point. You already know what it is. Got my boy Kendall VanDerBilt here from the Fantasy Football Tavern. Kendall, we just recorded on your network. Now we're doing on my network. I feel like we should just, whoever's in the comments, just be like, yo, if you got your own YouTube, we're clearly free. We have some time together. So I pride myself on being well put together. I like to dress nicely. I like to keep myself looking sharp, but I am the second best looking person on this live stream right now. So to the man in the suit, tell the people where they can find you.
Hey, here. Cheers to that. Hey, glad to be here, man. Thanks for recording with me earlier. Super happy to be live, hanging out on one of my favorite shows. Doing good. Yeah, you can find me at the Fantasy Football Tavern over on YouTube, coming to the podcast streets and all the other places. But right now, we're still learning. We're on YouTube, putting out a lot of content. Me and Phil doing a lot of Dynasty content. The Get Right Fantasy Network guys have brought us on board and looking to some Dynasty content from us. So I've been putting a lot of that out with your help. So if you like watching Phil, come to my channel so you can watch more of them.
Let's do it. Shout out to the boys, Get Right Fantasy Network. Classic Mike and I were able to do a show on Monday night, just the two of us, which kind of turned into the Giants Variety Hour, which was kind of fun. I didn't know it would be that way. We were just going through a mock draft, and so if you're not watching Hard Knocks with the New York Giants, shout out to my boy Mike DeReese. Mike is a national scout for the Giants, and for some of you that watch the show and know me, you know I was a college soccer coach for years of my life. When I was at Stony Brook, Mike DeReese was one of the football coaches and director of personnel on small Division I football, had like 17 different hats, and it's not Alabama. But we just became friends. We were just buddies. We were hanging out, and we kept in touch over the years. And so to see him get some FaceTime the other night in episode 2 of the Hard Knocks with the New York Giants, when they're going through the combine and, going through some of the different behind the scenes with the scouts, I texted him and I was like, dude, it's so cool to see you get some like proper FaceTime, because he works his ass off, man. So shout out Mike DeReese. I've asked him. We'll see. I'll see if I can get him as a guest here on the Extra Point. So fingers crossed. But yeah, it'd be cool to chop it up with him for a little bit. So for those that obviously are in here checking us out, you know where to find me. You can check out Instagram at _extrapoint_FFB. You can listen along at Patreon and also on Spotify. Obviously, join the live show every Thursday night here at 7 p.m. I'm also a writer for Dynasty Pros, so you can head over to dynastyprosfootball.com. Check us out there. It is a subscription website, so not to tell you to have to spend some money, but at the same time, there's so much content. I think it's like $5 a month. It's worth it. But definitely come check out some of the written content over at dynastyprosfootball.com. Last thing is, always, I got a couple buddies always asking, how can we best support you? Jump in the comments and hang out with us. What up, Rasta? I know I see you in here. Here he is, as always. Shout out, brother. Fantasy Network. But jump in the comments. Obviously, share the show. If you like what you hear, go ahead and share the content with your league. We know you're in a ton of leagues. Follow along on Patreon and Spotify. That helps out a lot as well. And then last quick announcement before we jump into the content tonight. We're finalizing a deal with Underdog right now. So for those that are new to Underdog, we will be able to get you a promo code here in the next couple of weeks. So we should be able to have a nice new promo code. I don't know exactly what it'll be yet, but a money match basically. And it'll be a whole lot more than what I got when I started with Underdog. So, hit that subscribe and like button for us. Show us some love. And without further ado, let's jump into give the people what they came to talk about. It is Dynasty buy or sell tonight. We are talking all things trades. Let's do it. Let's jump in, man. Let's get it going. Kendall, I made a trade recently. It is a 12-team full. Yeah, I know. Weird. Phil made a trade. Shocking. 12-team full PPR Dynasty Best Ball League. No tight end premium. I traded I traded away T. Higgins, a 2025 second, and a 2025 first for Arthur Juwan Brown and a 2025 third. I obviously made the trade. Tell me your thoughts.
So my thoughts are, I should say thus. I should use like the big fancy words with the fancy suit, right? My thoughts are thus. I think it is a good, proper hedge against some poor range of outcomes for what could happen to T. Higgins. It's easy to see through the rosy glasses of what could be whenever a player changes teams, even if it's to like almost an objectively worse environment. The fact that things are happening and the buzz, it tends to elevate their value rather than go down, even if it's kind of a worse situation that can happen sometimes because the buzz. I think if T ends up in, say, Las Vegas with quarterback issues in 2025, it's a fantastic hedge. It just doesn't have to happen that way, but it certainly could. And if your team is already, and I know most of your teams, I'm pretty familiar with your teams, and almost all of them are in a very winning window. And it's not a win now. It's a win this year and probably next year. Sorry, not sorry, right? This is a
I'm
great
not.
put an exclamation stamp on that. And now you have the added security with a massive contract for AJB that he's going to be the guy. And they pay the other guy too, right? So now it is a hyper target condensed offense for the foreseeable at least 3 years. So locked in elite role, elite offense, no downside, all upside. If you can afford maybe, losing a little bit of the picks because those picks are not likely to crack your contending lineup for a long enough time, I think it's a great trade. But it's a great trade without winning the trade where you did a bad deal. It's just a good trade. And the other person taking an upside shot on T and some picks if the roster isn't where it needs to be. Sometimes you need to be friendly with the risk in order to, hit big. I think it's a side where both sides probably can't win because it kind of depends on the T outcome, but it's a good hedge where you're still happy even if T ends up well because you're significantly better this year. You're still better next year. And we don't need to really think about value outcomes when we get into year 3 at that point when we've already cashed in on 2 good years of value. That's my general thoughts.
Yeah. And we got Rasta in the chat saying, great trade, by the way. Get the guy that just signed a new contract and connected with Hurts, who's also signed. Well done. Look, contracts matter in Dynasty, and I'm not going to sit here and waste a bunch of time and, toot my horn of the trade that I made. Obviously, I made it. Obviously, I felt like it was a good trade. But I think for the people that are listening and tuning in, it's interesting because contracts, they matter so much. And when you look at the ceiling players, AJ Brown could he be the overall wide receiver one? Maybe. I don't see it. I think he's probably in the top 3 to 5. He's probably going to finish right around ADP, but it's a best ball league. He's going to have spike weeks. Now, I don't have Jalen Hurts, right? It was an auction format. So, I think my stack is, Dak and Ferg, but I have Justin Jefferson in that team. I've got, Romo Dunze, some young guys. I got McConkey. My point being is that the safety is, I love what you said, the safety and hedging. Where is T going to play next year? I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. Could be probably one of 15 teams. Where's AJ Brown playing the next 3 years? Philadelphia. Who's his quarterback? Hurts. It ain't going anywhere. So, yeah, appreciate the thoughts. Obviously, I give up, a 2026 first. It's 2026. If my team with the rookies does what it's supposed to do, it's probably a mid to late first. So always something to consider. Again, not trying to toot my horn. We got a lot of trades to get through tonight, but it's more about the point I'm trying to make is understand what you're giving up and what you're acquiring when you get these picks. You have to look at the full roster because that could turn into a mid to late, could turn into an early. Obviously, I'm anticipating with Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown on this team, probably a mid to late first round pick. So I feel good about it. Kendall,
I made a trade.
You made a big one. What you got for us?
Oh, it's tiny. So
it's not
10 team PPR. This is a 1 quarterback 10 team. No tight end premium.
Yep.
As PPR. I traded away Mr. Breece Hall, and that's it. And I got back a few pieces. I got back Jerome Ford and Christian Watson, a 25 first, a 26 first, a 25 second, a 26 second, and I believe there's a second pick in there. It's 3 seconds and 2 firsts between 25 and 2026. 25 first, 26 first, and then 3 seconds. Plus Watson, plus Ford for Breece. It's hard to fit it all in a sentence. It's a lot.
Is that it? That's all you got?
I have sweated over this back and forth 100 times. I need someone to talk me off the ledge. What do you think about what I did?
So first of all, what you did to answer your question, I love it. I love it. I get it. It is hard to trade away Breece Hall. It is outside of Bijan, and I mean, I would probably put Gibbs in that category. I think it's the second most difficult running back to part with. But I think you got a ton of value. And here's the challenge. What do you do with those picks? Now, I know you, and for the folks that are listening that don't, you're going to turn those picks. You're not going to keep those picks. You're not, you and I play each other. We had a ton of leagues together. And one of the leagues we play each other week one, I've made this comment before, I'll make it again. I don't know who's going to be on your team week one. And we're only, 49 days away from the start of football. So I'm not even bothering to look at the lineups because whoever's there may not be there week one. But my point is that if you're going to make a trade this large, you have to do something with those picks. So we either need to draft well, you need to trade up and consolidate some of that capital into a higher value first round, get into the top 3 picks, right? Sorry, I can't remember. Is this a super flex league? No, single quarterback in this league, right?
Single quarterback. It is
right.
Triple flex. It's single quarterback with triple flex. So your skill position players are pretty elevated.
So you need to get into those top 3 picks for one of the top wide receivers, or let's say one of the running backs really elevates in next year's draft class. So I love what you did. I wouldn't make this trade. I'll be honest. And I think people know, if they've been listening, they know me well enough. I wouldn't make the trade that the acquiring manager did for Breece. And here's why. You mortgaged a lot. You mortgaged 2 years of your top 4 picks. And yes, you could win the league. And you probably will. I mean, we talked about this before the show. His 2 starting running backs are now Bijan and Breece. You don't get any better than that.
Oh my God.
You just don't. You don't get any better than that. But we've also talked through, what if you just get ousted in the first round of the playoffs by a guy whose team just snaps and posts the high score of the season? Because that is a possibility for playoff teams, right? So to me, you have to win the league with this kind of trade when you're going all in. You also don't know. Christian Watson could be good, right? We're kind of down on Christian Watson, the injury history, but you and I were just doing some stuff on your show where we were talking about best and worst picks in startup dynasty drafts for rounds 7 through 10. And we brought up, I think, round 8 or 9. Excuse me. We brought up Christian Watson's name as one of the values that we thought. I think it was round 9. Mm-hmm. So if he's healthier this season in an offense we like, that's another piece that he just gave up in this team that you've acquired. So to me, it's difficult to give up that much capital because you have to win. It's the poker analogy. You're all in. I think what will end up happening is he'll make the playoffs almost guaranteed, right? Barring crazy injuries. But I also believe that there's some other teams and some other rosters that you and I have analyzed, and actually we've done it on this show. It's not guaranteed he wins the league. So it's hard to give up Breece, Bijan, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb. But I think if I think if it's someone you really want, sure, go for it. I have a hard time giving up that much capital if I don't win the league. It's really tough. It's really tough. So we're going to get into a bunch of more trades, and I've really just want to do 2 quick things before we do. Number 1, I got a couple comments I want to get to here in a second, but number 2, I just want to thank everybody in the leagues that I'm in. I'm in a ton of leagues, and I just sent out a quick message through Sleeper earlier this week and said, hey, we're doing a trade show on Thursday night, Dynasty buy, sell. If you have any trades you're considering making or you already made and you want our takes and our opinions on them, I had like 15 different messages. I couldn't even get all the trades into the show. We would try to keep this to an hour. So really, really excited that people were, that enthused by what we're doing and obviously value our opinion enough to submit it and hear what we have to say.
That's the truth.
But thank you to the folks who submitted some trades. So really quick, Rasta coming in, talking about that AJ Brown trade earlier. And this is just a good comment. This isn't about AJ Brown. Known versus unknown is huge in Dynasty. Also, why I don't mind trading picks, especially first for guys their situation. Contracts matter. Follow the money. But at the end of the day, guaranteed production is probably going to be sustained by the top players, whereas you're still taking a dart throw, right? Ask yourself, the 104, 105 last season, you spent it on Quentin Johnston. You have not gotten that kind of return. So always good to keep in mind known versus unknown. And then I just want to do this really quickly here with the roll. Appreciate you being here. I know he's in obviously a big follower of Get Right Fantasy Network. What do y'all think of DK Metcalf? And so let me pose it actually as a different way, Kendall. Quick yes or no. Would you trade to acquire DK Metcalf? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. What would you what if you're trying to trade him away then, since you're not trading for him, what would you want in return for Metcalf? So kind of a good different way to answer the roles question here.
When I trade a high caliber wide receiver, I like to trade for a different position. I think it's too easy to get caught
Yeah.
up in ADP rankings, Fantasy Pros, ECR, and stuff like that when you go wide receiver for wide receiver. So I want to go
Yep.
very different. I'm probably flipping him for a running back to strengthen that room, since I usually go hero RB and I'm pretty thin. In terms of like a straight up trade, I'm really into Brooks and Benson. I think I would love to target one of them if they drafted him, but also are dealing with a little bit of luxury in their RB room, and want a significant weapon at wide receiver. I'm probably looking at something along those lines. If I'm going for a tight end, if it's like tight end premium or I'm weak, I think orchestrating a trade for Bowers, who is very low in the market, in the media, the reason he'll have to earn catches, I think, has suppressed his value. That's a type of trade I think you could probably get done. Or I would use him to maybe secure a quarterback that I'm into. If I could orchestrate something for him for like maybe take a shot on Levis or flip him for like maybe Bo Nixon a pick, or I'm higher on Drake May than most people. I think his value is as low as it's going to get. I would like to target a guy like that, potentially straight up, depending on league format. Those are kind of some targets. I'm not looking, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I'd have to go into the tank a little bit on this. So obviously take this with several grains of salt, but those are some ideas that I would be looking for. I would stay far away from wide receiver. It would probably highlight the fact that DK, compared to other wide receivers, has a few more red and yellow flags than some other wide receivers. Running back itself is already a red flag, and people don't like tight ends. And so I think you have a better chance of getting decent value if you go a different position.
What if you were in a 3 wide receiver league with Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and T. Higgins as your wide receivers, and you traded DK Metcalf away to get Roman Wilson and a first back? How would you feel about that? Asking for a friend.
Trade DK away, get Roman Wilson in a first?
Yeah.
If it's super flex, I would. If it's one quarterback where that has a chance to be a much worse pick, I'm starting to not love it. It's close, and I'm not sure that I would do it if it's one quarterback. Super flex, I would.
It's super flex.
I would do it.
I made that trade last week. That's why I asked. I wasn't planning to bring that up on the show. I just was like, oh, well, it maybe goes with the roles question. And I was like, do I have a comp for the DK Metcalf trade? And there it is. So
just about. And to the role, Joel said he likes DK better than those guys. I do too. The role. Sure. I just want to throw that out there. I do like DK better than those guys. Yep. I do think if you're doing this type of trade, I'm going to get an extra pick back, or I'm going to get, I like a lot of like the third round wide receivers this year that people aren't as high on, that have really gone the lengths on. So if I can get some lower asset pieces that I think will appreciate greatly, this is the type of trade I'm going to do, where I want to acquire multiple pieces when it makes sense to do so. But I agree, straight up, I don't think it makes sense.
Let's I know Grant Harrison got a love this. Grant Harrison's got a live question in here. I will come to that next. Let's do one more trade from the show doc, because I know a bunch of folks submitted earlier this week, and then let's get to Grant's trade after. So let's go through this real quick. I know we were going to talk about this Kyron JT trade. I'm going to skip it. We'll come back another time. This one's more important, I think, right now. Rose Mitchell 17 is in one of my leagues, submitted a trade to me, not to me, but for consideration for us to talk about. 12 team. Super flex, tight end premium. I don't know if it's half or full. I don't know. It's half. Okay, perfect. Thanks. So it's half PPR. Jaden Reed, Brock Bowers, and Rose Mitchell traded away Jaden Reed, Brock Bowers, and Evan Hull. He has Mark Andrews on his team. He received Xavier Worthy, Xavier Legette, a 2025 third, a 2025 first. So Kendall, let's take the picks out of the equation for a second, because we're basically talking about Bowers as a rookie, Reed as a second-year player against Worthy and Legette, who are both rookies. What are your thoughts on the players there? Reed, Bowers, Evan Hull for Worthy, Legette, and we'll get into the picks in a minute. But thoughts on the range of outcomes for those guys in this trade?
Sure. Range of outcomes. So value aside, range of outcomes for Xavier Worthy. You could say all over the place. In my opinion, it's actually a more condensed range of outcomes. I think Worthy has a capped ceiling because Mahomes likes to spread the ball around. He'll never be the one while Kelsey is there. And even if he becomes the de facto one, that's not how an Andy Reid offense is really ever going to function outside of a Tyreek Hill that forces the issue in an uncontrollable way. Just a very good wide receiver is never going to be an elite alpha wide receiver in an Andy Reid system who is going to consistently bring up all the other pieces, find mismatches that Mahomes in his brain are absolutely going to find and spread the ball around. So capped ceiling, but I think a very elevated floor. Again, due to the ability to scheme talented, speedy wide receivers open in ways that the rest of the league has oftentimes completely failed. You look at the James Washingtons of the world that just never really became anything, and they would have a much different career arc if they were on the Chiefs. So a little bit of a lower ceiling, despite what speedsters are kind of known for. But I do think a very elevated floor. I think a very solid wide receiver 2 is pretty much in his range of outcomes with some pretty big spike weeks and then playoff things that down the line could even get better for him next year if they shed a little bit of weight and get rid of Hollywood Brown for elsewhere. And he kind of takes on the role himself. So that's his range of outcomes. Does he ever get much wider? I mean, he could pull a Jonathan Mingo, or he very well could become kind of hard to find a player comp for him, but could he be
it's hard.
DK Metcalf-esque? I know it's his build, but he also could fill a similar role in that offense where, they do need a solid X that can go up and get the ball, can win down the field. I don't really think they have that in spades quite yet. So I think he could be like a low target, high touchdown upside, maybe a little yards after catch kind of going on there. Legette's range of outcomes, I think, is more interesting in year 2. I think if you just look at his year 1 outcome, I think you're short selling him. His year 1 outcome, I don't think is great. I still think the offense has to find an identity. They don't know what they're doing. They might change it up several times, and there's a good chance they'll start running it heavy. And when Brooks gets healthy, they'll just run it even more, which again could create red zone opportunities for some fades to him, but I don't think the target volume is going to be there in year 1. You're really banking on a year 2 better offense, Thielen gone, Mingo full backseat, and you're kind of hoping he can almost do like an AJ Brown, like, oh, nope, he's the guy, flashed rookie, and then kind of becomes something. But I do think his ceiling is pretty severely capped by a quarterback that I don't think is ever going to reach an elite level in a team whose identity is most likely, based on their current roster, going to morph into a run first, kind of hard-nosed team similar to like Lions teams of the past, Steelers teams of the past. I think that's kind of the brand of football they'll play, which means carrying into year 2, his role is a little bit elevated or decreased. So I think he's, again, wide receiver 2. I don't think he really has many wide receiver 1 outcomes. His floor is probably the same as Worthy, but his ceiling is significantly decreased. So we're looking at 2 wide receiver 1s, one a little bit higher end, one much lower end that could be a lot worse. So that's kind of my take on those 2 particular players. I won't go into Bowers in depth, but I do like him a lot in year 2. I think that team is going to have to find some identity there.
Yeah, to me, it's so I left these out on purpose because we'll get to him now here. The first round, he sent me a second note. Rose Mitchell, 17. He projects the first to be a mid late and the third early. And I'll be honest, I don't care if the third is early or late. Unless you get the next Puka or you find a Jaden Reed who was a 3rd round pick, like, it's such a slow percentage of a dart throw. It's ironic we say that, and Jaden Reed's in this trade. I kind of take the Jaden Reed Bowers Hull side of this trade. Hull to me is pretty irrelevant, other than just absolute dumpster fire of injuries has to happen. But Jaden Reed attached to Jordan Love and a good offense, and I get it. You have Andrews. I understand it, but I don't see a situation where any of the quarterbacks in Las Vegas, maybe they'll be on the roster, but like Shedeur Sanders is the starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders next year, or somebody of that kind. You know what I mean? Like it's another rookie, and it's probably a young rookie who's probably a high draft capital pick in the first round and is going to be with Bowers. So to me, Worthy and Legette, we've been through. Look, they have holes in the profile. Could they be great? Yeah, but there's a lot of question marks. It's really interesting trade because of the youth of all the players. The first obviously will depend on what happens. We don't have the rest of the roster, so we don't know what this looks like. But I think it's a pretty balanced trade. What I will just say is kind of put a pin in it. I'm making sure I'm taking a 2025 first round running back though with that pick. If I just traded for these wide receivers, and we do like the next year's running back class a lot more than this year, especially in terms of number of players we expect to be relevant. So I could see it Excuse me, I've been a little sick this week. I'm carrying this thing. I'm trying to get rid of it. But I could see it being a good trade, for the Worthy Leggett and picks manager. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of things have to go right. But again, pretty balanced. So a lot more trades to get to, but I did say we'd get to Grant Harrison live in the chat here. Recent trade, Grant Harrison saying here, 12 teams, super flex, and it is a start 10. 10 total on the roster. Okay. So he gave up Geno, Ridley, and Moss to get Dak. I'll leave that on the screen for just a second so folks can see it. Geno, Ridley, and Moss for Dak. Kendall, go ahead. Go first. I know where I lean, but go ahead.
I like the Dak side by a considerable margin. I think Dak is. I'll be quick on this. He's undervalued right now because when you pull up his card on Sleeper or any other website, you're going to see his age, and he's going to look like an old quarterback. However, I think people are looking at quarterback age very differently or they should be looking at quarterback age differently than the rest of the skill position players. Russell Wilson's like 38. I mean, he's not the same guy, but Dak could literally have 5 to 8 more pretty good years. I mean, he had moments last year where he was absolutely a league winner. I know the first half of the season was a little bit weird when the team kind of figured out their winning identity. They also stopped winning at some point, but I mean, he was a top 5 quarterback that doesn't really rush the ball, which is very hard to do. And he did it in spades. Geno is going to be out of the league pretty soon. I do like Moss a lot this year. I just think the runway is very not great. And I think Ridley will be great to good this year. But in dynasty assets, I think they really fall off pretty hard. I think you got a nice value for Dak there. Dak is he's already underrated. If Dak finishes this year as the quarterback 5 or 6, it wouldn't completely shock me. And that only giving up that for Dak is just great. You're buying him at an absolute market low, and it hasn't adjusted yet. Great trade.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I agree with everything you just said. Geno may not be in the league next year. Calvin Ridley's got a short shelf life with his age. I don't care about the contract. And you're also betting a lot on Will Levis, and I'm not entirely sure that's a bet I want to make. And Moss's runway is. It could be good. It could be a combination of him and Brown. Burrow could just say screw it and throw the ball 1,000 times. I just see a lot of ways that could go wrong. So I take the Dak side anyway. If you're listening on Spotify or on Patreon and you can't see the screen, Grant Harrison just threw in the comments he has CD as well. So it was nice to get the stack. I was on the Dak side of this trade anyway. Now I'm over the moon for it. So fantastic trade, great value. Grant, really, really good trade. And hey, man, hope it works. Hope it brings you to the playoffs for sure. With those two guys, you definitely have a chance for top 5 at each respective position built into that cost. So nice trade. Trade submitted here between Kryptonaut and Russ D in one of my leagues. 12-team Dynasty Best Ball, another Best Ball trade. PPR. Breece Hall, again, man, people trying to get rid of Mr. Hall. Breece Hall and Christian Watson on one side of the trade. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs in a 2025 first on the other side of the trade. Kendall, 30 seconds. Which one do you like better? Which side? The Watson Hall side or the Colts receivers and the pick?
So I'll put it this way. If it is super flex, it helps the Pittman downside because that first becomes at least significantly more interesting to mildly more interesting. That being said, Breece and Watson are both best ball targets for me in particular. I mean, I think there's going to be some weeks where the Jets defense just means Breece doesn't have to do anything too crazy. But the days where he has to, where he rushes 20 times for 100 yards and does the McCaffrey where he catches 9 balls, like he won me a few titles last year doing that later on in the year. That's fantastic for best ball, where it reaches a truly elite ceiling. And that could be pretty special. Watson is also just teed up to be a fantastic best ball asset that can really do some special things, where I think his ceiling plays in that offense. I think he's going to be very consistent, very good wide receiver, but I think his ceiling definitely went down a little bit. Getting Pittman and Josh Downs, I don't know is a boon for me. In best ball, I don't think Downs is a best ball guy for me. I think he's a much more. I think he's a PPR like mini Edelman with what he can do in some cases. But the general idea is even with that first and Pittman and Downs, you're just not nearly reaching the upside of Breece on his own. let alone Christian Watson. Yeah, not loving it. Also, you're giving away a first. Yeah, I don't know. The more I look at it, Brees and Christian Watson, it's a win for me. It's a fair trade, but I'm just higher on those two guys.
Yeah, I don't know that it's that fair. I may take a different stance on it. I'm very much in the Brees Hall, Christian Watson side of this trade, and the answer is touchdowns for me. I just don't see a world where Josh Downs is ever going to get close to Christian Watson in terms of touchdowns. Even Christian Watson played 9 games this season, and he still scored 5 touchdowns in a shortened season. So to me, yes, it's best ball. So like you don't have to set your lineup and worry about which Colts receiver to play that week. But you and I were just talking about this either on your show or pre-show. And I made the comment, and I'll make it live on this show. What if in the touchdown department, it's just the Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor show? Like, what if the touchdowns just don't come? Michael Pittman's going to get his yards. But what if he just doesn't get the touchdowns? Because that's always been the knock on Michael Pittman taking that step as the next, iteration in his career is the yardage is there. He's the alpha. He's been paid on a 3-year deal. He's just not a double-digit touchdown guy. And double digits is difficult, but he's not even a ceiling touchdown guy. So I'm on the Brees
Jelani Woods in there, baby. Don't forget
about
him.
I mean, look, I think he's going to score touchdowns. Obviously, he's going to score a couple. He's not going to give us a Deontay Johnson and goose egg us. But what if he just does what he's been doing and scores 3 to 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns a year? Like, that's not winning you weeks. So I'm on the Brees Hall, Christian Watson side of this one, especially in 12 team where running backs are so scarce. You can have, like you said, in best ball spike weeks for Watson. Sure, you might have some spike weeks for Pittman and Downs, but you're not going to have the same caliber of running back, that you're going to get to play against Brees Hall. Obviously, everything presumes health. So, yeah, it's an interesting one for sure.
Downs scored almost no points for him in a best ball format if his wide receivers are good. That's the thing that's really killing me.
Correct. Yeah, it's a good point. All right, next one, KDH 11. This one's interesting. We're going to take both sides of this one here and kind of talk through this for a couple minutes, because then the big trade that we want to spend a lot of time on and it'll be fun here is coming up next. But this one's good. 12 teams, super flex, PPR, no tight end premium. And that no tight end premium is important. Team A, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, Raven stack, and obviously the quote unquote de facto number 1 wide receiver for Lamar Jackson. So Team A has Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Team B has Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman, plus Deontay Johnson, plus a 2025 second. So, Kendall, which side of the trade do you like? And we'll strongman this. Go ahead.
If you're giving me the open take, the Anthony Richards side is robbing their neighbor pretty blindly here. But it's not robbing him because this is clearly a voluntary trade. When you're trading this magnitude of pieces around, both sides clearly like what they're getting, stack for stack. I am taking Anthony Richardson straight up above Lamar Jackson in Dynasty startups.
Okay.
Not everyone is on that take. I definitely am. I think the Richardson Pittman, and just the 25 second would be a great deal. But getting Deontay sprinkled on top, a guy I'm pretty high on, a guy that could catch 100 passes. Yeah, that's a great deal for the Richardson side.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say this quickly. I agree with you. I'd rather have the Richardson side of the trade as well. But I think there are dynasty managers, and if you're listening to this show, you might be one of them. There are people who will say Lamar Jackson has now won 2 MVPs. He has taken his team to the cusp of a Super Bowl multiple times. And we haven't seen that from Richardson yet. We've seen glimpses, and the glimpses that we saw was a 3.5 game sample. And yes, he did things in those games that even Josh Allen, who's been the number 1 scoring quarterback in every format of fantasy football, has not done. So the ceiling is there. The consistency isn't. The injuries are there. The health hasn't been done. So to me, I'm with you. I'd rather have the Richardson Pittman side of this trade. I don't know that the DJ plus the pick was necessary. I think that was... I'm trying to think in my brain as I'm talking of like the negotiations that occurred and why that was necessary to add something like that on. Because if you told me in a vacuum, Andrews and Jackson for Richardson, Pittman plus Deontay, that's more fair. Or Richardson, Pittman and the pick, that to me is a more equitable trade. I do understand the tight end, and it's no tight end premium, but I do understand the positional scarcity at tight end. So I can see someone who's saying, I mean, look, maybe their starting tight end was Greg Dulcich, and they took Ben Sinnott in the rookie draft this year. To get Mark Andrews, it's a massive upgrade. I mean, the guy's a top 3, top 5 floors, however you look at it. I just don't think the Baltimore side of the trade got enough. I do think it's pretty one-sided with you as well. But I think there are people that are skeptical about Anthony Richardson, and they don't know if they're going to be able to get those ceiling performances week over week, and they don't know if his body's going to hold up. So it's what we talked about at the beginning of the show with A.J. Brown. You're trading guaranteed production for what you think could happen. And it's a question of really, how do you want to play Dynasty, right? You and I are both very much on Anthony Richardson's side, both in this trade and in real life, for how we've built our teams. We have lots of shares of Richardson. But you and I play to have ceiling performances, right? And it doesn't mean that our way is the right way. It just means that's how, like Classic Mike, who we work with on Get Right Fantasy Network, give him CJ Stroud all day. He will take CJ Stroud over Anthony Richardson every single day of the week. And I will make the argument to Mike, and I've made it to him. CJ Stroud had one game last year where he threw for over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. Anthony Richardson doesn't even have to throw for 200 yards if he just rushes for 40 yards and 2 touchdowns and throws for 2 more. Like, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Stroud cannot get to the level that Richardson can from a points per game basis just by being a pocket passer. It's just not possible the way that fantasy football is scored. So to me, that's how it's a question of, again, how do you want to play? And you and I want to play for ceiling. So aside from the Richardson, having more on that side of the trade, it's difficult because I get the Lamar side of it, but I lean the Richardson side here is really, really well. So I'm going to pause here real quick, jump into the comments. Victorious talking about Breece Hall earlier. I know we've had a couple Breece Hall's trades. Jets are a scary team to have pieces of. Really feel like there's a chance of disaster around that entire team. Just bad vibes. Kendall, let me ask you this question because my voice is is moving and grooving here, and I want to I want to drink and I give you a minute to chat. Outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, are there any other Jets players right now that you would try to trade for in a dynasty format?
Yes. But there's only one. I'll throw out the one it's not, which is Malachi Corley. I like him. My brother went to WKU, got a little love for the Hilltoppers over there, and I like Malachi Corley. But I think for what he is, he's actually being steamed up past what I think he might be. He's already overhyped to the point where his price doesn't make sense for me at a value. I need him more unknown. I actually would trade for Braylon Allen though, if I can get him for cheap because of where Breece is at. It's MetLife. Choose the crap out of people. Breece already lost. He already lost one ACL. Love Braylon. I already liked him as a prospect. Hearing, I think, early training camp rumors where he was actually better in the passing game than people gave him credit for. And my take on Braylon was if he can develop some chops in the passing game, serviceable to good, doesn't need to be great. He could be a real weapon. And the guy, he's not even 21 yet. He's so young. I like the long-term aspect of, if an injury were to happen, he would be fantastic. MetLife creates a lot of injuries. That team we were talking about the downside case, if their defense puts up 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, because, man, their defense can seriously hurt some people, Braylon Allen's going to run the second half out a few times, and I think you're going to really see what he can do in those second halves. He's the player that I want to pick up cheap before I can no longer get him cheaper anymore once he shows a little bit of what he can do in the field. That's the only guy I'm trading for, though.
Yeah, I don't have that much of a dissimilar take, and I think the reason simply being is because of Aaron Rodgers. We talked on your show actually earlier today about the best startup picks in rounds 7 through 10 and best and worst. And if you go back and listen to that show and give it a watch, all of my worst takes were all the aging quarterbacks. It was Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford and Geno Smith. And I just don't know that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback next year. Honestly, I don't even know if he's going to be the quarterback this year. I mean, sure, anybody can get injured on any play, but the dude just skipped a whole week of mandatory training camp to go on a vacation in the woods. I don't know. He's nuts. He's just nuts. You know what I mean? I'm kind of on the side with Victorious. There are some, I won't say bad vibes, but there's some weird vibes around it. I like Malachi Corley. I think he's a good player. I have him in a couple leagues because I took him in the third as, a late round dart throw because that's what you're doing, but I'm not trading for him. So yeah, I don't know if I need to spend a ton more time on it. I just want to go back on something real quick here from the last trade. I forgot to put this comment up. Victoria's saying, sorry to recap, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews for Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson in a second. Victoria's commenting here. If I'm the one getting Richardson, I definitely try and convince the other owner to throw in an extra because I'd be taking on so much risk. I think it's a good comment simply because of the fact that we talked about it. You haven't seen it in a sustained fashion from Richardson yet. You just haven't, right? We've seen the ceilings, we've seen the preview, we've seen the glimpses, and then look, we've all been to the movie theater and seen movie previews, and we're like, oh man, that movie looks awesome. You go to the theater, and I'll be honest, that newest Jurassic Park movie that came out, I thought it looked really good, and I went to see it, and boy, did it suck. I was so disappointed, man. I've never walked out of a movie. I'm one of those people like, hey, if I pay for it, I'm committed to this. But I was pretty close to walking out. It was awful. So hoping there's a better Jurassic Park 4 or whatever they call it, Jurassic World coming back around because the preview looked
the other way, man. Just start. Don't go up in numbers. Go down.
Just bring
watch the old one.
Just bring Jeff Goldblum back, man. Like for real, not like a 2-minute cameo at the end. So anyway. Goku, interesting. I like this one, man. Here we go. Live in the chat. This one's fresh for us. He got Chase, and I'm gonna have to assume Jamar Chase, right? Jamar Chase, DeAndre Swift, and a second. And he gave up George Pickens, Chris Olave, and Zamir White. We don't have context on this, so Goku, if you're still watching, throw in the comments, man. Give us the league size, scoring format. We'd love to hear. Is this? I guess tight end premium doesn't matter because there's no tight ends in this trade. But yeah, give us the league size and scoring format. That would be, and if it's super flex or single QB. But in a vacuum, Kendall, let's break down this trade. What do you have?
All right, I'm gonna lay it. It's tough because I am the highest I know on George Pickens. I really like what that could be. And I think Olave I'm starting to feel like he's at the underrated. I started the offseason with Olave needs to be a hard fade for me, and I slowly warmed up and had to look into it. So it's tough because I like those two guys. That being said, I'm taking Jamar Chase and Swift. Guys, you haven't seen the best of Jamar Chase yet. You think you have, telling you haven't. When Higgins goes away and he gets a different complementary piece and Burrow is finally healthy and they're both on the same page, it's I think there's still some incredibly special things left for them to do. And Jamar Chase is at his lowest value. I think he's going to be for a long time right now. And I think you're going to see this season what can happen when Chase is healthy for a season. I want to go, if he's what I think he'll be this year and going forward, you're just not going to miss it. The linchpin for me is like White's kind of, he's better than a 1-year rental, but I do think he fades considerably going into next year. There's just so many question marks. There are paths to where he can have like Najee like relevance a little bit later on. I mean, like what Najee is now is what Zamir White could become, which is honestly very favorable based on where we currently project he'll be in a year or two. He wishes he could be Najee when he's 26. But that being said, if Zamir White falls off and you kind of erase him from the trade and input like 3rd round dart throw, because that might be what his production is at some point next year, Pickens and Olave, just for what I think Chase is already good enough. And I'm a little bit higher in Swift. So the linchpin of the trade for me is well-designed, well-constructed trade. If I was the, Pickens and Olave receiver, I mean, you could probably convince me to try to do something like this. But I'm going to give like a 10% edge, maybe 5%. It can't be more. It's pretty fair for the Chase side.
Yeah, so Goku adding in the comments, it's a 12-team full PPR super flex. I while you were talking, I had a couple minutes obviously to look at it, and it looks decently fair. The longer I stare it down, it looks more fair on paper than my initial my gut reaction to it was. I'm still on the Chase side, but I agree with everything you said. So I'll just say this as the caveat. If a trade is really close, I'm most of the time going to take the side of the trade with the highest value player. And I know that seems like common sense to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, what can you trade Swift for next season? I don't know. Not much. You know what I mean? Like maybe a second, You know what I mean? Like I've actually had a guy in our league, one of Kendall, you and I are in this charity league together. And I've got a guy in the league who hits me up all the time, literally every day, actually asking about trades. And he's one of the guys he's been asking about is Swift. He hasn't done his rookie draft yet. He's trying to package Swift with picks to get into the first round. Nobody's taking that trade. He's told me it's not gotten done. He's trying to package Swift with, somebody small to get a second and a third. Nobody's taking that trade. He's offered Swift straight up for a second. My point is that nobody is trading to acquire DeAndre Swift right now in a rookie draft that has not been conducted. So to me, Pickens and Olave are good. They have some ceiling, but they have low floors, and it's because of the quarterback issues, right? Like we don't know.
Olave's floor gets way scary. If he has one more year where he's not the guy, his name recognition fades to not being Olave, and that is a death knell that you can't recover from.
Agreed. I think it's difficult to see a path for Spencer Rattler to really be an impactful quarterback if the Saints have to play him this year, and the contract says Derek Carr is going to be there for 2 years. So they could take somebody next year and try to dump the contract. We saw Russell Wilson get dumped for $1 billion. But my point is that it's scary with Olave and Pickens. We don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be this year. It's going to be Russ week 1, but it could be, who knows? It's just a mess. So to me, I'm on the Chase side. I think it's closer than my initial gut reaction, but give me Jamar Chase because he has the absolute highest upside of any of the players involved in here. So Rafi 69 bomb, Ram check. I saw this earlier, actually, Kendall, when we were recording. I didn't bring it up because it didn't make a big difference, but we had just talked about Alvin Kamara not being one of your favorite picks in round 8. And now Ryan Ramczyk out for the year, so Carr won't be able to get to the ball to Olave behind that line. Look, man, the Saints are just not. You talk about Victorious earlier, talking about the Jets have bad vibes. It's a shame because I like some of the pieces there in New Orleans.
The city.
Yeah, the city's cool. The pieces of the team's great. Like the whole Hurricane Katrina thing, you just want to root for them to be good because they've been through a crazy disaster. It's just like they just can't do it. I just don't know how they do it. Not with Derek Carr. So it is what it is. But I think at the end of the day, the Jamar Chase side of that trade is going to win out every time. So
have some faith in Swift there, my guy, by the way. Goku. Swift, he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be serviceable. He'll be usable. Honestly, it's not someone I want to trade for. And if it'll be just fine. So
let me quick Swift take, and I'll keep this like 20 seconds. Okay. Swift had a problem in Detroit because he wanted to bounce to the outside on every single play, hit the home run, fell out of favor with the coaching staff. Things happened, yada, yada, right? Last year, what I saw from Swift was a guy who, if he was told to just take the B gap or whatever and just run this way, he did. And he did it, and he did it again. And he did it while saying, hey, Swift, I need you to get just close enough for Jalen to run it in. All right.
Yeah.
He did it. Okay. He earned it. He never lost the job. I mean, he started to see it was weird, right? Because he wasn't the starter, and then he was game 2. It was super weird. And then he just got in line and did his thing and did a very quiet, I won't catch the ball a lot, even though I'm a pass catching specialist, and I'm gonna rumble on the ground like a good student. He learned. He took his licks. He's not the big, badass running back he was coming out of college that we all thought was going to be very, very good. I think he learned, he got NFL ready, and now he goes to what should be an ascending offense with a team that wants to feed him the highest value touches without the bad ones. I think he's in an upside situation. People are just associating him with it. The narrative has been going like this, and then he went to the Bears, whose narrative is, you see my background, okay? Clearly, it's not been great for me for the last couple of years, okay? I'm not saying we're going to turn it around all in a day, but it's a much better offensive ecosystem. He's arguably in a significantly better situation than I'll ever be on the Eagles by actually being able to get a touchdown or two. Swift, he's going to appreciate. He won't be a world beater, but he's going to appreciate. Don't lose faith. Hold and appreciate later.
I just wanted you to know that wasn't 20 seconds.
22 seconds, all right?
I think it was 24 seconds, but who's counting? So I want to just add one thing because I love what you just said. I was watching, I don't remember what game it was, so don't quote me on this. It doesn't really matter. The point of the story is still relevant. I was at Sunday football with a buddy, and he's got a DFS lineup. And the matchup was pretty good that week for the Eagles, and it was probably the Giants. Sorry, Classic, if you're listening, but whoever it was, right? And DeAndre Swift rips off like a 36-yard. They were on the 37-yard line. He rips off a 36-yard run, gets shoestring tackled at the 1-yard line. I look at my buddy. I put my arm around him and I went, I'm so sorry, man. And he's like, what? And I was like, he's not scoring. Next play, Jason Kelsey, Jason and Jalen Hurts. Boop, tush push. I'm like, sorry, brother. You just needed 12 more inches, man. You just needed that. That was it. So it's I don't know. I'm stuck with Swift. I'll be honest. I'm not where you are with him. I think he might be on maybe one of my rosters. He's a hold for me. I agree with you. I don't know what to do with him. I need to see it this season and we'll see. It's still crowded there. All right. I want to get to Goku's trade here, and then we're going to get into Nick Roney's here at the end because this is kind of the big one that I want to spend some time on. Let's do this one here. Goku, another trade. 10-team, PPR, Superflex. Josh Allen is his QB. Ooh, he traded for Mahomes, gave up Dell, Monty, Daniels, and Corum to get Mahomes, Ayuk, Mostert, and a first. I'm sorry, I need to read that again because I think that, okay.
Did you get to Ayuk and was like, wait, what?
Hold on, wait. So he traded for Mahomes. He gave up Tank Dell, David Montgomery, so receiver, running back, Jaden Daniels, and Blake Corum to get Mahomes.
It better be Jaden Daniels, right?
I mean, it has to be. Mahomes, Ayuk, Mostert, and a first. All right, I'm going to go first here. I'm sorry. This is an Goku, you fleeced this trade. This is an awful trade for the person that got the other end of it.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a player other than David Montgomery over Mostert that I think is better on the Dell, Monty, Daniels, and Corum side of it. Patrick Mahomes, Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes. Brandon Ayuk, Tank Dell. It's close. It's close, but I would still take Ayuk. If Ayuk's in San Francisco, I would take Ayuk. Actually, that's not true. What if Ayuk goes to Dallas? He won't because it's the Niners, right? And they won't send him there. But like, what if he goes where he's the number one, the true alpha? You know what I mean? So I would still take Ayuk over Dell probably.
They're even at worst, Ayuk at best.
Sure, it's splitting hairs. It's semantics, right? I would take Monty over Mostert, and Corum's not even close to a first-round pick. So Goku, you have Josh Allen? This is stupid.
You killed him. It's 10-team where premiums are premiums. So they're worth more. Like Mahomes and and Josh Allen are worth more in 10-team than they are in 12-team because of everyone's team's good. You need to be elite, not good. So it elevates people like that. That's why I got as much as I did for Brees, because it's 10-team and you need to be elite. Yeah, you won by I hate to say it, a landslide. And I don't know who the other person was. Hope they're not in chat watching this, but live and learn. Hopefully their team is still good. But yeah, you got them. You got them pretty bad.
I used rookie hype to my advantage. All right, I want to say this before we move on. I wonder if no, I'm not gonna say it. I think Goku just wanted to tell us how badass this trade was, because it's pretty badass trade, man. You crushed that thing. Good job, dude.
You lived up to your name. All right.
I just don't see. I'm curious what the other person thought about when they were doing this. You know what I mean? Like I'm curious when they evaluated this, what they thought as to how their team got better. Like I will say this as a caveat. I could see a world where Jaden Daniels, I play Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window. I know you play in a little bit longer window than I do. I could see a world where Jaden Daniels in 10 to 12 years scores more fantasy points because of the rushing upside than Mahomes does over the next decade. I could see that as a path, right? But I don't see a world in real football where Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback than Mahomes, unless Jaden Daniels wants to take the Commanders to 3 out of the last 5 Super Bowls and win them, right? Like, I just don't see it. So I get it, but that's a hard one for me to understand. You know what I mean? I just can't really wrap my brain around it. So Victorious, maybe Mahomes hurt them last year. I mean, maybe, but he was like what, QB 12 or something, QB 11. I have to look. I don't know what it was maybe QB 8. I don't know. Hold on, I'm just guessing. He was QB 8. So there you go. So okay, boo-hoo. The first time in his life he didn't, you know what I mean? Like boo-hoo. He's still a QB 1. I don't know.
pretty quick sell away from Mahomes. If he's owned Mahomes, sure. I feel like the only way that happens is he's owned Mahomes for 1 year and he bought into Mahomes, paid the price, then Mahomes didn't do it for him. But if he had owned Mahomes for more than a year, you would just know, like, hey, man, it's coming around.
But look at the players in this trade, though. Like it's first of all, I don't know how you trade Patrick Mahomes. I haven't seen a lot of trades for Patrick Mahomes in any of the leagues that I'm in, and I'm in a billion of them. Yeah, it's tough. Good trade, Goku. Really good trade, man. All right, let's do it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Nick Groney, our buddy Nick, sent us a trade. This has not happened. This is a trade proposal. He's trying to do this. So there's two caveats to this. Number one, this hasn't happened. So it is a range of outcomes that we're going to go through. Number two, I forgot what my second thing was. It's all good. Excuse me. His rookie draft hasn't occurred. So the trade proposal has not been accepted and the rookie draft hasn't occurred. So there is positioning for picks here. So Nick Groney currently is on the second side of this. So Nick has the option. He's trying to acquire Kendry Miller and the 2024 107. He is offering JSN and a 2024 209. This is a single quarterback, 10-team, full PPR, no tight end premium. Let's break it down, man. Let's do it. I'm stoked on this one.
Woo-wee.
So the rest of the information that Nick and I had a phone call today earlier about this. He has told me that Caleb Williams will go at the 102. The manager, I don't know if it's his buddy or a relative, doesn't matter. But he has talked to that manager, and that manager clearly has a quarterback problem or just values Caleb. So he's taking the 102. And Nick is trying to acquire Kendry in the 107 because he is targeting Ladd at the 107. So we're going to come to putting names on this in a second. But from a pick perspective, let's start there. Kendry in the 107 for JSN in the 209.
I have gone back and forth on this probably 5 or 6 times since we first looked at it, and I keep changing my opinion. So bravo to just a really well orchestrated trade. Thanks for helping us make some great content. You want me to start with where I generally land right now? Or are we going into
if it's no names yet, because we'll spend more time on that to make it more realistic. If I offer this to you, or if you saw this in a chat, which side do you lean on? I know it's close.
Most years, generally, I would take JSN in the 209. Okay. Most years, because the 107 in single quarterback, I think takes a downgrade to super flex. I value first round picks by a decent margin more when, like this year in super flex where there's quarterbacks. So because it's one quarter.
Wait. Sorry. So okay. I see what you're saying. Go ahead.
Like the 107 is a little bit devalued, so I like the JSN 209 because the 107 isn't as great as it normally would be. But it's this year, it's 2024, and the entire tier break of like the 107 through the 112 is all chalk. It's all awesome.
Yeah.
It's just really good. So in this year in particular, that really changes things. So like if you're asking me like 107, 209, average year, I would take that. But the 107 this year in single quarterback is real stupid nice. And I kind of lean that way by a little bit.
Okay. I lean that way as well. I would take Kendry in the 107 as well. I traded JSN away. I know that the Seahawks just gave Lockett 2 more years. DK still, though, number 1 in that offense. I know we've talked a little bit about DK tonight. Geno may or may not be the quarterback. It could be Sam Howell next year. It could be a rookie next year. It probably isn't Geno next year either way. And we've talked about it a million times. What if Tyler Lockett doesn't get hurt? What if Tyler Lockett doesn't miss time? Tyler Lockett has made his career off of catching the ball in space and getting down to the ground as quickly as possible to not get injured, to preserve his body. This isn't a guy that runs across the middle and takes shots. He's had some injuries in his career, but for the most part, he's been available. So, yes, everyone just expects JSN to overtake Lockett, but what if he doesn't? What if he just doesn't do it? And that's the hard part for me. And you can make that same argument, Kendry and Alvin Kamara, but I'd rather have the 107. I'd just rather take the shot. You and I've talked about it, and let's do this. Let's get into it. There are some real names to put to this trade, right? So We know in a single quarterback league, we know Caleb's going to go off the board at the 102. We've been told that. So we're going to use that as to factor into our conversation. So the big 3 wide receivers, Marv, Neighbors, Rome, going, and then Caleb, right? Whatever. The order doesn't matter. But those are the first 4 picks. So now you're getting into this range of player. We agree Brooks is at the 105, yes?
Yeah, he is for me, and I think
for me as
he
well.
will be for most people.
Okay. Now, if this was right after the draft, I think you probably would have seen Bowers in there. You might have seen another receiver. You might have seen McConkey there. You could have seen
Bowers,
Worthy there.
and BTJ were all
Right,
pretty
BTJ.
chalk, like pre-combine. They were even kind of there.
Yep. But I think now, as we've gotten deeper into the summer and, obviously getting pretty close to training camp, I think we'd probably agree that Brooks is at 5 there. All right. So now you're saying you're looking at a pool of BTJ, Worthy, McConkey, Coleman. So that's the pool of players that you're mathematically going to be able to pick from 2 of those guys at the 107. So let's say it's Kendry and McConkey for JSN and the 209. Now I pulled a 10. It's funny because I'm in a billion leagues, so it's pretty easy for me to find this. I pulled a 1 quarterback, 10 team full PPR league that I'm in. And here are 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 wide receivers that were all drafted at the 209 or later. So you have a positional pick. So let's say it's Kendry and McConkey for JSN and Jermaine Burton. Would you take that trade? Which side of the trade do you lean there? So that's running back and receiver for 2 receivers, Kendry and McConkey.
It's one of the better names you could mention at the 209, because man, do I like what Burton could do and be value-wise next year. That one's honestly hyper close. I'm still taking Ladd.
Yeah, I am too. All right, so let's play a game.
You want to play a game?
Let's play a game. The game is called Winner Stays On. I love this game. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Devontae Walker or Luke McCaffrey?
Luke McCaffrey.
Luke McCaffrey or Javon Baker?
Luke McCaffrey.
Luke McCaffrey or Ray Davis?
Luke McCaffrey.
Luke McCaffrey or Malachi Corley?
Malachi Corley.
Corley or Ben Sinnott?
No TEP.
No TEP.
Passing on the tight end.
Corley or Drake May? Single quarterback. Now it starts to get fun.
Drake May.
Drake May or Jalen Wright?
Jalen Wright.
Jalen Wright or Troy Franklin?
Troy Franklin.
Troy Franklin or JJ McCarthy?
Troy Franklin.
Troy Franklin or Marshawn Lloyd?
Marshawn Lloyd.
Marshawn Lloyd or Jermaine Burton?
Marshawn Lloyd.
Marshawn Lloyd or Jalen Polk?
Polk.
Okay. Those were the names in reverse order of the draft that I was in. 10 team, exactly this format. So you landed on Polk, who ironically went at the 208. So Kendry Miller and Ladd McConkey, who went at the 108 in this draft. Benson actually went at the 107, but the guy that drafted him had a little running back problems, and he also had back-to-back picks, so he got a running back and a McConkey. So Jalen Polk and JSN for Kendry and McConkey. That's what this game just determined for us. Which side are you on?
Ooh, man, I like Polk. That's almost a tier break for me because I do think Polk ends up being the wide receiver 1 in an ascending offense, and he could do some interesting things there. That is going to put me to shreds if you make me debate Polk. You go 1 tier down, and it's not like it's clearly like a 1% edge in my head. Like it's not by a lot, but it's like clearly the Ladd side, because Ladd's upside as a singular piece in a 10 team and what I think he could and will be is just too good. And I think you can take. Honestly, Ladd's so steamed up and will be so steamed up. You can just buy Ladd to then sell at a profit tomorrow if you want to. It's such a neutral trade that the value you get tomorrow and the next day is just greater.
And for those that are listening to the live show, and for those that might be listening on the, on the, and can't see, what we're talking about with some of the comments here, we're using Lad McConkey at the 107 because that's who this manager is targeting. Keon Coleman could be there. BTJ could be there. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what you decide, what you believe is going to be the best player of that range of wide receivers. So you could throw that in there to help you make this decision and decide what's going to be best. I still want the Kendry side plus the receiver. JSN and Burton makes it a little bit closer for me. When we played that game, it actually kind of helped solidify for it. I'm like, ooh, JSN and Burton. That does, because again, what do you believe about JSN? If you believe JSN has the higher outcome and better path to playing time, and the process says that he's going to be there longer than Kendry was, because wide receivers have longer shelf lives than running backs do. Maybe you want 2 wide receivers, but to your point, and I'm like you and I think a lot alike, the wide receivers are just going to hold their value. So to get a first round wide receiver like that, again, everybody could bust, everybody could get injured on every play, but we presume health. We presume the players are actually going to play and project are going to perform the way we project them. I just think the resale value is going to be higher with the Kendry and the receiver. So that was fun. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that? That was pretty good.
I'm sweating over here, man. I felt like I was on the clock, man.
Winner Stays On is fun. Winner Stays On is hard. It's a hard game. And I have the board. I can see it. So you're just hearing the names, and I can see like, oh, okay, I'm going down the list. I'm like, I wonder, who would I take? Who's he going to take? But yeah, it's different. So cool. Well, that is the main portion of the show. And obviously we want to make sure that we get into the 2-minute drill before we wrap up the extra point. So 2-minute drill, boom, put me on the timer for 2 minutes here. I want to talk about a couple of win now players, and these are not players you should be building around. These are not players you should be targeting in your startup drafts. But if you are like us and you're in a billion leagues and they are on other rosters, I do think these are good players to acquire cheaply that could, if you are in a win now window, could push you over the top for a championship. Before I read off the names and what I think they are worth, if you've been listening to the whole show, or if you have been tuned in, remember Kendall made that monster trade trading Breece Hall away, and he got in return Jerome Ford, Christian Watson, a 2025 first, a 2025 second, a 2026 first, and 2 2026 seconds. I would never make that trade. I think you are mortgaging way too much for one piece. So please, if you are in a win now window, acquire the right players, or acquire players that aren't going to cost you your entirety of your picks. Because if you don't win that championship, you really could be setting your dynasty team back a couple of years. So for me, it's really important that you listen to these players and decide for yourself. But look, Davante Adams to me is a win now window. I don't care who the quarterback is. The guy had a second most targets, 178 targets, or 187. My dyslexia is coming in, but he had the second most targets behind only CeeDee Lamb in the league last year. You can get him for an early second, maybe a mid second, but I've personally traded for him to get him onto my team. I traded an early second away, and then I took Davante Adams and flipped him to go get James Cook. So it can be done. Mike Evans. He's the number one target in that team. He might actually be quarterback proof, because if you can get 1,000 yards with Baker Mayfield, that's impressive, because we all knew he'd get 1,000 yards with Tom Brady. You can get Mike Evans for an early to mid second round as well. If you are in a win now window and you desperately need a running back, I did this actually last week or 2 weeks ago. I traded for Raheem Mostert because I really needed a running back. I gave up a 3rd round pick. I'm never going to miss that 3rd round pick. Raheem Mostert was the running back 2 last year. Yes, he had 18 touchdowns. No, he will not do that again. Yes, touchdown regression is coming, but I do think that it is possible that he still is relevant and possibly gets close to 1,000 yards this year, if not over 1,000 yards again. And if he gives you 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, that's still a really good value in a win now window for a 3rd round pick. And lastly, we talked about it a little bit already with Kendall. Keenan Allen, not a player you should build around, but for one season with the Bears, maybe 2 for an early to mid 3rd rounder. Keenan Allen's a possession guy, and for a young quarterback to have a valuable player like that to just move the chains and do what Keenan has always done, I think Keenan Allen for an early to mid round 3rd, if you're in a win now window, would be a great player to have on your roster to push you over the top to help you make a playoff run without mortgaging every single future pick on your roster. So that was the 2-minute drill. And as always, we like to finish with the extra point. I just want to say really quickly, if you make a trade and it makes your team better, you won the trade. If you make a trade and you make a run to the playoffs or you win a championship, you won the trade. So everyone's concerned with what does Keep Trade Cut say about this trade? Am I getting enough value? If you went and took Breece Hall right now, I haven't done it, Kendall. We should have done it. But if you went and took Breece Hall and put his name in there and put all those picks that you got,
it says I lost the trade.
It's gonna, does it? It says you lost the trade?
It says I lost the trade.
Oh my God, it does?
It does. Like,
oh wow, okay, I got to do that. Really? All right, well,
we'll go into that later. Different trade calculators, maybe for separate episode, have very different algorithms on how they put total. Like DLF likes to. It's kind of a math equation. Just it adds it all up. So the they're very low on pick adjustment. Keep Trade Cut sometimes goes a little bit overboard. So because of that, but again, that's why exactly what you're saying. You're sorry. If it makes your team better, just put down the calculator for a second. Don't go crazy. But
yeah,
he's projected to win the league this year. The guy that got Breece, he might win it 2 years in a row before I win it, until I decide to quit.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. Look, I think it's really important, and this is kind of the last piece I want to say as the extra point here tonight. If you've learned nothing from this show tonight, understand this in one sentence: acquire pieces that are going to appreciate in value. At the end of each season, everyone's going to be hungry between the playoffs, the real NFL playoffs, and the Super Bowl, when fantasy season has already concluded, to make some of those trades. We know there's pockets of time in Dynasty, especially as we get close to the draft, on either end of the draft, as we get into camp. There are just times of the year, when guys are, this could be girls, when managers are really excited about trading. I always want to go and find players that I believe are either going to help my team win. Some of the players I just mentioned, so that don't cost a lot, that you can push over the top, or I'm getting guys like we had some tonight with Jamar Chase, who are going to appreciate in value. Some guys that, hey, if it doesn't, work out, or I need to sell them in a pinch, I know I can get really good value later. And that's my biggest thing in a trade. Get guys that are going to appreciate in value, that will either help you and sustain your wide receiver, your running back, your quarterback room for the next 3 to 5 years, or are going to be guys that if you need to sell, you can get a lot of high value picks to rebuild and restock your room, because there isn't much of a waiver wire in Dynasty. Our benches are our waiver. So depth is really, really important. Kendall, love you, man. Thanks for being a part of the show tonight. It was a little longer than we normally go, but I think it was one of our better shows. Really, really great content. And before we sign off, one last time, tell the folks where they can find you.
If you are so inclined to watch a complete dunce in a suit talk about fantasy football, come check me out at the Fantasy Football Tavern on YouTube, soon to be on Spotify and all the podcast platforms. Just on YouTube right now. You can find me on Patreon as well. But we're doing a lot of Dynasty content, lots and lots of mock drafts, and I particularly like to do extra segments on buy low, sell high. I like to kind of play the stock market of Dynasty. It's how I enjoy the game. I think it's fun. I like trading like Phil. But yeah, come check out. Phil's on my show all the time. We do a lot of stuff back and forth. So yeah, come check me out at the Fantasy Football Tavern. We'd love to have you. Come on over, have a drink. If you want to learn how to bartend a little bit, that's going to be incorporated into the show very, very soon. Really looking forward to that.
Hey, that's the stuff people don't expect when they go on to other shows, man. They're not ready for that. They're excited for that. It's going to be awesome. So, always love having you on the show, man. I'm really excited that the next couple of weeks, I'm not official yet, but lining up, in addition to Kendall, some other new guests that are going to be coming on and joining me. Lots more Dynasty content. So again, you can find me here every Thursday night, The Extra Point, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 Eastern time. You can find me on Patreon. You can find me on Spotify. And then the last thing is always, if you like the show, throw it out to the guys and the girls in your leagues. If you're listening and you're subscribed and you like the content, make sure people also know about it. Help me promote the page. Help me promote what we're trying to do here as a brand. At the end of the day, that's really what helps us to continue and keeps us motivated to go, is to know that we've got some value, but that other folks are hopefully helping to win you championships, right? At least make the playoffs and pushing you over the top to get that ring. So we will be back next week. And for everybody who is not going to be able to make tomorrow night, Get Right Fantasy Network will have a show. But if you're not going to be able to make it, have a great weekend. And we'll look forward to talking again next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Extra Point.